Every morning, neighbors watched the same man walk down the quiet street with his pack of loyal German shepherds. It seemed ordinary, until one curious bystander followed him and uncovered a truth that shook the entire community. What he was hiding would leave everyone speechless. Every morning, before the sun fully rose, the streets of Maplewood came alive with the soft padding of paws. A tall man in a dark coat emerged from his modest brick house at exactly 6 o'clock, holding 6 leashes in one gloved hand. The German shepherds trotted in perfect formation, their heads high, ears twitching to the morning sounds. Neighbors sipping coffee from their porches often paused to watch, marveling at the unusual sight. The man never spoke a word. He simply walked, his gaze straight ahead, as if the world around him didn't exist. His dogs mirrored his discipline, never barking, never straying from his side, moving as though they understood an unspoken command. Children on bicycles slowed down to watch him pass, whispering to each other about how cool and mysterious he looked. For months, the neighborhood knew him only as the dog walker. People speculated endlessly. Some said he must be an ex-military canine handler. Others joked he was training them for something secret. His stoic demeanor and the dog's flawless obedience fed the mystery. No one dared to approach him. And yet, every morning, without fail, he appeared, silent, steady, and unknown. As the days passed, curiosity in the neighborhood began to grow. The dog walker had become a living mystery, and his 6 perfectly disciplined German shepherds only fueled the intrigue. People started noticing little details they hadn't seen before. He never waved at anyone, never stopped to chat, and never let the dogs interact with other pets. It was as if he lived in a world of his own. Mrs. Thompson, who lived across the street, became particularly fascinated. From her kitchen window, she started timing his exact routine: 6 a.m. departure, 6:42 a.m. return. She noticed how the dogs always returned with the same calm expressions, never panting or muddy, like they had been on a mission rather than a simple walk. Soon, whispers began circulating. "What's he hiding?" one neighbor asked. "Why so many German shepherds?" said another. Some believed he was training the dogs for the police. Others suspected something far darker, like he was hiding a secret no one would dare imagine. The tension grew each morning as more neighbors peeked from their blinds or lingered on their porches. The man, however, remained unchanged, silent, steady, and untouchable. But one unexpected morning, everything began to shift. One chilly morning, the quiet neighborhood routine was disrupted. The man appeared later than usual, and this time, he wasn't alone. A single German shepherd walked beside him, while the others were nowhere to be seen. His face was stern, his eyes darting left and right as if checking for something or someone. From behind their curtains, neighbors watched in silence, their curiosity now mixed with unease. Mrs. Thompson grabbed her binoculars, heart pounding. The lone German shepherd wasn't calm like usual. It seemed tense, ears perked, tail stiff. Halfway down the block, the man suddenly stopped, crouched beside the dog, and whispered something that no one could hear. Moments later, he darted into an alley, vanishing from sight, leaving the dog sitting at the curb, motionless and alert. Minutes ticked by, and the tension only grew. Then, the man reemerged, carrying a small, black duffel bag. Without a word, he signaled to the dog, and together they disappeared around the corner. The whispers turned into quiet panic. What is he carrying? Why would he leave the dogs behind? That night, the neighbors couldn't sleep. Something was definitely wrong, and they knew this was only the beginning of the mystery. By the following week, the entire neighborhood was buzzing with curiosity and quiet fear. The man continued his morning walks, but now, the pattern was unpredictable, sometimes with all 7 German shepherds, other times with just 1 or 2. Each time, his pace was hurried, and he avoided eye contact with anyone who passed by. A group of neighbors decided to take matters into their own hands. Led by Mrs. Thompson, who had lived on the street for 30 years, they formed a small watch group. They took turns discreetly following the man during his early walks, trying not to be noticed. At first, nothing unusual happened. He walked the dogs, paused at the corner, and returned home. Then, one morning, Mr. Patterson spotted something that froze him in his tracks. The man entered an abandoned house at the edge of the block with all his dogs. The door creaked open, and within seconds, the dogs slipped inside silently like they had done this many times before. The neighbors exchanged worried glances. Why was he going into an empty house? And why did the dogs obey him with such precise, almost military discipline? Something far bigger than anyone imagined was clearly happening behind those doors. The next morning, the neighborhood watch gathered before dawn, determined to uncover the man's secret. Hidden behind hedges and parked cars, they watched as he left his house with all 7 dogs trotting at his side, their movements calm yet precise. His face was unreadable, but there was an intensity in his eyes that made even the most skeptical neighbor uneasy. The group followed at a safe distance as he led the dogs to the abandoned house again. This time, the front door didn't just creak open, it swung wide enough for them to catch a glimpse of the dim interior. Against their better judgment, Mrs. Thompson tiptoed closer to peek inside. What she saw made her gasp so loudly that the man spun around in surprise. Inside the house, the living room had been transformed into a makeshift shelter. Blankets, pillows, and food bowls were scattered everywhere. But it wasn't for the German shepherds. There were injured, abandoned dogs of all breeds lying on the floor, some with bandaged legs, others trembling in fear. The man's voice broke the silence. "They have nowhere else to go," he whispered. "If I don't save them, no one will." The neighbors stood frozen, the weight of the revelation settling over them like a heavy fog. The man knelt beside a trembling puppy with a broken leg, gently stroking its fur as he spoke, his voice low and filled with exhaustion. "I used to work at the local shelter," he said, staring at the floor. "But when the funding was cut, they started putting dogs down, healthy, loving dogs. I couldn't let that happen. So, I took as many as I could." His voice cracked, and one of the German shepherds nudged his arm as if offering comfort. The neighbors exchanged guilty glances. For weeks, they had gossiped and speculated about him, never imagining that his secret was one of selfless love and desperate sacrifice. Inside the house, the air smelled of old blankets, wet fur, and faint traces of medicine. It was clear he had been struggling to feed and care for all the animals alone. Tears welled in Mrs. Thompson's eyes. "Why? Didn't you ask for help?" she whispered. The man gave a sad smile. "People talk, but very few actually listen or care." At that moment, one of the smallest puppies licked his hand, as if reminding everyone why he had risked everything. The next morning, the man awoke to a sound he hadn't heard in years: laughter. When he opened his front door, he found his street filled with neighbors holding bags of dog food, warm blankets, and even toys. Mrs. Thompson led the way, carrying a basket of fresh bread and a handwritten note that said, "You're not alone anymore." Word had spread quickly. By afternoon, volunteers arrived to clean, feed, and tend to the dogs. The once quiet street buzzed with life as children played fetch with the healthier pups, while adults gently cared for the sick ones. The man, overwhelmed, leaned against his fence, tears streaking his weathered face. A local animal rescue organization offered immediate assistance, promising to find loving homes for the dogs while ensuring none would ever be abandoned again. Reporters came, too, but for once, the story wasn't about judgment. It was about hope, compassion, and a man who chose love over fear. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the man sat on his porch surrounded by wagging tails. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a secret. He felt like a hero because he had turned his quiet act of sacrifice into a community's shared miracle.